Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of vitamin retailer and nutrition industry executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Dr. Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. So the purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Since 2013, Adam has been immersed in the world of health and wellness, building brands and businesses that help others thrive. He's also passionate about sustainability in manufacturing, and through sustainable packaging experts, he provided zero carbon emission packaging solutions for nutraceutical and pharmaceutical brands, helping companies reduce their environmental footprint while maintaining high quality packaging. At GreenFrog Packaging, Adam's mission is to create products that perform like traditional bottles without leaving behind a toxic legacy. His goal is to help brands lead with responsibility and give the world packaging that protects, not harms. Welcome, Adam.
Yes, I love that. Great summarization. Well done.
Thank you very much. So we have a lot to cover today, and I have to tell you, I do so many of these podcasts, and I talk to a lot of interesting guests about a lot of interesting topics. But you have something that I think is really, really unique that I've never seen before. So I'm really excited about what today's topic is. And so let me start out with this question. So, as I understand that after years in the health, wellness, beauty, and supplement industries, something didn't make sense to you anymore. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had my own brand since 2013, been fortunate enough to be a part of this amazing industry and help, hundreds of thousands of people, in essence, live healthier, better lives. That's the goal, right? That's the hope. But then one day I was literally looking at one of the bottles and packaging that I had sitting on my desk and was wondering what the hell happens to this thing once it's been used up and discarded and thrown out. And I was just blown away at the fact that the average bottle will sit around for the next 450 years if it isn't, I know it's staggering, 450 years if it isn't recycled, or if it escapes a landfill, right, and ends up as pollution. So that really didn't sit right with me, and we'll go into that more detail, but I just felt like I had a calling to solve and figure this problem out. And this was before ChatGPT. I actually had to do a tremendous amount of research, but yeah, that's what ultimately got me thinking about, well, I have a responsibility for the packaging that I create just as much as I do for the products that I'm creating for my customers.
Okay. So, every day our industry takes the best of what nature provides, whether it's plants, nutrients, other nutraceuticals, and it turns them into products that improve human health. But when those products reach the end of their journey, what we give back to nature is essentially plastic pollution. How did that realization change the way that you saw your business?
Yeah, and that was the aha moment, if you will.
Yeah.
Once I realized that I was using all these amazing resources, and everybody in this industry, whether it's pet products, beauty products, supplements, we take what Mother Earth gives us, right, to help make ourselves healthy. But then what do we give Mother Earth back in return, right? And it's like we're giving it back plastic pollution, and more importantly, we're giving it microplastics. And so those microplastics, as the bottles that are escape containment end up as pollution, when they break down, they fragment, they leave these microplastics behind, and that actually contaminates the earth, which is really breaking the cycle of health for us as humans, right? So as these microplastics ends up in the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, we are then ingesting those microplastics back into our body from the same resources that we were taking the healthy products from before. So that made no sense to me, right? So I was like, I got to figure out, maybe this is my calling, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, but I figured if I didn't tackle this problem, it was only going to get worse, and so I set out on a mission to do that.
You know, I've often thought, as do a lot of people in our industry, that the health of the earth is really tied in with human health, and so I take it that you believe that caring for human health and caring for environmental health are really part of the same mission.
100%, and it feels like common sense to say that when you really look at the whole picture, but I don't feel like as an industry we've done a great job of that. We are trying, right, with like recyclability and composting and all the alternatives.
And I have questions for you about that too, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, 100% for sure. But it's not really enough, and the problem is much larger than that. And of course, the two are interconnected, because at some point there's an interjection between us taking these resources from the earth and then now poisoning ourselves with what should be healthy ingredients, healthy raw materials, because we're contaminating all of it, right? And so at some point we're going to run out of runway, and we're going to reach a point of no return. But we're not there yet. We can do something about it. We've cracked the code, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
So let's talk about sort of the scale of the challenge. How much plastic packaging is produced every year, and what actually happens to it after consumers are finished with it?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, and that's what blew my mind when I really started to dig into this problem. If you just take the supplement space industry on its own, I'm not talking about pet or beauty or even pharma, but just the supplement industry, we're producing about 100 billion plastic bottles and caps per year.
Wow.
Okay? And the vast majority of those 100 billion are only going to be in circulation for 60, 90, 120 days. Some will sit around longer in somebody's cabinet, but they're not really designed for long sustainability, right? So what happens is when they get discarded or thrown out, very few actually get recycled. Not because the intention isn't there, but because the value of the resin, the plastic material, has very little value on the secondary market. So there isn't a lot of reason to recycle these bottles. So then what happens to them? Well, then they go down the chain and they end up in landfills. Okay, well that's okay because it's contained, but there is a large percentage that actually escape containment, and those are the ones that end up in the oceans, our waterways, our parks, rivers, or streams. And that is really where we felt the problem needed to be resolved, and that was the emphasis behind the technology that we created.
It's when you say that what you've just said, several things run through my mind. One of them is I remember years ago when I used to be affiliated with a franchise chain of vitamin stores, and all the stores had these big stand-up containers in there where, as a customer, you could come and you could bring your empty bottles and dump them in there, and the idea was this was all sent back to a common place for recycling. And while that sounds great, it turns out from what you're saying that it was a nice idea, but at the end of the day, it didn't have the impact that we hoped they would. So, plastic pollution has really become one of the defining environmental issues of our time. Now, you've used the term microplastics. So what would you explain exactly what are microplastics? What does the science tell us today? And why should every consumer care?
Yeah, that's another great point. And just to finish off what you just said, only about, and this is a fact, only about 7%, 8% of all plastic of all time ever created, of all time, has ever been recycled.
Oh,
right? So
gosh.
Recycling, it's a good idea, but in practicality, it doesn't work for a lot of different reasons.
That's so sad.
It is sad, especially in the supplement, health, and beauty space.
Right, the irony of it. Yeah,
the irony, we're huge offenders, but no one's really taking a stand and doing something about it until now. So then you fast forward, you look, okay, what is a microplastic? So microplastics inherently are what they sound like. They're large pieces of, as a bottle, just as an example, begins to break down over time, over the 450 years, right? it fragments and it begins to fracture, and those pieces break off, and they just get smaller and smaller and smaller, almost to the point where like they're microscopic, right? And so then that ends up in the oceans, and as the fish are eating the phytoplankton, right, the most basic building blocks of life, the fish are eating that. The animals, and then the animals are eating the fish. And so what happens, and then we ultimately end up eating the fish or the food. And so the microplastics get into the bloodstreams of all those animals, that which we then consume. And now there are clinical studies showing that there are a tremendous amount of microplastics in our lungs, our bloodstreams. They're now showing up in babies as they're being born. So this is not a joke. This is very serious. And if we don't do something now, yeah, it's not going to impact us today, maybe, but down the road for future generations, it's already become a problem. We can help that tremendously right now.
So when you looked at all this research, was there a statistic or some scientific discovery that really stopped you in your tracks and convinced you that this wasn't just another environmental issue?
It was, to me, it wasn't just one thing. As you look at the macro level of it all, you really begin to see how profound and how wide-reaching the problem truly is. And the supplement industry, pharma, beauty, and pet, that's just one category amongst dozens, right, of offenders. But sure. I just figured, because I know it so well, and the irony of what we're taking from planet Earth and what we're giving it back to, we figured like the perfect place to start.
Yeah. So it's so disappointing to hear about recycling, and especially since we've spent decades promoting it. Has recycling then failed, or have we just expected it to solve a problem that it wasn't actually designed to solve?
I don't want to speculate on all that per se. I feel like there are ways to integrate all of these solutions into a final solution, right? So recycling has its place. It's better for some things than others, but I do think it has value. But it's kind of like sifting through, right? So a certain amount of product will fall into the recycling bin, right, which is great. But then you need other fail-safes in place for the ones that don't make it there, right? And so the microplastics that end up as pollution, there is no safeguard for that until now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely does make sense. All right, so we've also seen the biodegradable plastics and compostables and countless sustainability initiatives. Why has it been so difficult to find a truly scalable solution?
Well, pricing has a lot to do with it, right?
Oh, sure.
Because cost of plastic is actually the perfect mechanism, especially for our industry, for delivering consumer goods. Plastic inherently isn't the problem. It's what happens to plastic if it ends up as pollution.
Got it.
So that's really where the disconnect is. Plastic's great because there's moisture barriers. It's cheap to produce. It keeps the product safe and protected, while it's being transmitted and delivered. So plastic is great in a lot of ways, but really the problem is what happens if it ends up as pollution. That's the problem we're ultimately trying to solve.
So, yeah, I mean, essentially, as I would interpret it, at some point your thinking really shifted. So instead of saying, how do we eliminate plastic, instead you started saying, how do we create a better environmental outcome if plastic becomes pollution? So that was a pretty important change in your perspective, would you say?
Yeah, well, as I was trying to figure all this out, and obviously we'll connect the dots and how we came up with what we did, we knew that in order to change an industry, we had to be able to meet the consumer where they're at, right? And we also had to meet the manufacturers and brands where they're at as well. We've already seen that more cost-effective solutions don't make a ton of sense, because why is a manufacturer going to spend another 30 cents more for a bottle that's sustainable when they're doing, 100 million bottles a year, right? Like that's just a significant cost that they don't want to have to incur. Plastic's cheap, plastic's efficient, plastic does what it's supposed to do. So we don't think about what happens to it after we've disposed of it. So we wanted to create a solution that, again, met everyone where they're at and that was affordable, right? That didn't move the financial needle in such a way that it wouldn't make sense to utilize. And so that was one of the levers we knew we had to figure out was, okay, how do we create something that is already working, but just improve it in a way that it can be afforded by everybody.
Well, that makes a great deal of sense, which then, of course, as part of your search, that led you to the plastic IQ technology. You and I had a conversation. I was actually at a restaurant having lunch with my mother, and we were having a little conversation the first time I talked to you.
That's right.
And, what I thought was very interesting is when you told me that what you discovered was that this actually wasn't a new invention per se. It was a technology that existed for more than 25 years. That's amazing. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and that's the beautiful part about this whole thing. I, by no sense of the measure, am a chemist. I don't have a science background, but I'm really good at solving problems, and this was something that was really near and dear to me. So I started doing a tremendous amount of due diligence. I found a company in the UK who had developed a tech that made plastic bags biodegradable. So think CVS bags, Walgreens, those types of things, right? Really thin plastic. So I approached them and I said, hey, have you guys done anything in the rigid plastic, blow molded, hard plastic category? And they hadn't. So I shared my idea with them, my vision for what they had created, because going back to our just previous conversation of it has to be affordable. It has to be something that everybody can adopt. It has to be easily used in manufacturing equipment all across the country. This can't be a complex product to manufacture. So that checked all the boxes from that perspective. I said, let me get to work on this. And it took us about a year and a half. And we had a great partner on the East Coast who helped us do a lot of R&D. There was a lot of scientific back and forth. But lo and behold, after about a year and a half, we figured out how to take their technology and actually heat it up, cool it down, put it into these plastic bottles and caps so that it would hibernate. This technology would hibernate in the bottle. And then when it was in utilization, when it was being used in commerce, it would just lie dormant. But the real magic happens when the bottle, it can be recycled. So when it's thrown out, three things can happen. It can be recycled, 100%, no problem, where existing facilities are. If it ends up in a landfill, that's great, because again, we talked about it being contained, right? It's not as, but if it ends up as pollution and it's exposed to the UV sunlight, oxygen, and some environmental conditions, the plastic IQ technology, it awakens from its hibernation and it begins to internally break down, getting a little sciencey now, but it breaks on the molecular structure of the plastic below 5,000 Daltons. And when that happens, it converts from a plastic into a non-plastic waxy material. And that waxy material is identified as a food source for microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and it's actually consumed. And when they excrete this material out as waste, it becomes biomass, and it just returns back to the earth. So that's the magic. At that point, when it's excreted back out as biomass, there's no microplastics left behind. So that's the key to this entire thing.
That's pretty amazing. What a journey to get to that place. And that discovery led to your BioBottles and your BioCaps.
Yes.
And so I would say it seems now that this is available, it's really important to for brands to adopt this today rather than years from now. And would you agree with that?
I mean, 100%. Of course, that's why we're
that's why you're doing it, right? Silly question.
Yeah. No, not a silly question, but I mean, I think the light bulb goes off
Yeah,
to your point,
it's going off to
once
me right now as we're talking.
once you hear this, you're like, oh my God, like, why aren't we doing this? So, yes, once we had perfected the technology, the Plastic IQ, which is what we own, we said, well, where are we going to put this first? And I had the idea for the bio bottle and the bio cap. And we've been at this now for about 4 years. And I think when we got started in 2022, we were way ahead of our time, right? It was a nice to have. The pricing wasn't exactly where it needed to be. But if you fast forward now 4 years and a lot of work later, brands are truly starting to understand the value of what we're bringing to the table, and that what you put in the bottle is just as important as the bottle itself, because we got to protect our industry and what we're doing for consumers. So that was really the epiphany for the bio bottle and the bio cap.
You know, again, having been in the industry for 47 years myself and seeing the progression of this, you know, different kinds of bottles and glass bottles and plastic bottles, and and a lot of discussion about sustainability. One of the things that often comes up is that, you know, sustainability is really frequently perceived as expensive and complicated. So I want to ask you, how easy is it for brands to make the switch? And what does the actual investment look like?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that, and then I want to piggyback off that and maybe another discussion in regards to what are the other solutions that are out there. Because
Yeah,
I
sure.
think it's important. I think it's important we kind of connect the dots so you can see, well, why wouldn't I just use glass, or why wouldn't I use this? But to answer the question, which is great, is that because we're only taking 1%, okay, 1% of our technology, Plastic IQ, and 99% of either virgin resin or post-consumer resin, PCR, as a mixture for making a bottle or a cap, we're putting in very, very little amount of our tech. That's the beautiful part about it.
Oh.
This is not 100% use of another material. We are using plastic, but we're just improving the way the outcome is if it ends up as pollution. So we lose none of the quality. There's no drop off in performance, right? There's nothing different. If you were to look at a bio bottle and a regular bottle, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference in them at all. But what happens if they end up as pollution, that's the game changer. So we're able to keep the pricing approximately about the same as what a regular bottle would be. You know, maybe a little bit more. We're talking marginal, but now it's scalable. So you can get into a bio bottle, and we just have a stocking program, and maybe we can get into that a bit more down the road in our convo. But for the first time ever, we now have the ability, we've got a stocking program where a brand can order as little as one pallet, 100 cc all the way up to 400 cc. We've got some canisters, and we're adding more new molds every day. And if you have a custom project, we can work on custom projects. If you have a manufacturer that you're already working with, our technology seamlessly integrates in with any manufacturing facility. So there's no barrier to entry with this. The decision has to be made by the brand, the co-man, that, listen, we're going to put our flag, you know, our stake in the sand here, and we're going to do what's right, and we're going to figure out how to make this work. It might not be the easiest day one, but long term, this is the right thing to do. So that's what we're here to do, is work with our customers and our brands to figure out how do we integrate into what they're currently doing.
Well, first of all, that's fantastic. And
yes,
since, you know, I mentioned glass and other things, and you sort of took off on that a little bit, I just wanted to ask you, so how does something like the bio bottles compare to, say, well, we know how it would compare to, you know, conventional plastic bottles, but how would it compare to something like glass bottles or, say, gusset bags, something of that nature?
Yeah, I think the biggest, and so this piggybacks off a statement you made earlier in regards to sustainability being confusing. And I think that's an absolutely accurate statement for the following reasons, because the FTC has what are called greenwashing guidelines. That basically means that the word sustainable can mean something different to you than it does to somebody else, right? What does sustainability really mean? And so that's confusing, because you think glass is more sustainable than plastic, but maybe it isn't, because a glass bottle will take 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000 years to actually break
Okay.
down and return back to nature. So it's kind of relevant. I think one of the biggest misinterpretations is what are called PLAs, or compostable type of products. That is a big problem, because compostable bottles are probably one of the biggest offenders. And I'm not trying to call anybody out per se. I'm just kind of showing the difference in what's out there. But compostable bottles, they actually need to be packaged and sent in the mail to an industrial composting facility. So when something says
Oh,
compostable or biodegradable, it's confusing, because that bottle, a customer would have to use it up, put it in a packaging, ship it off to an industrial composting facility, and then at that point, that facility would break it down. But who's going to do that?
yeah, it's, yes.
And those bottles aren't even recyclable, right? So
Right.
they will 100% fragment and turn into microplastics. So you've got traditional plastics, they can be recycled, but leave microplastics behind. PLAs, which is your compostable, they're kind of the worst offenders. Glass is heavy, not totally scalable, takes forever to break down. And then you've just got kind of things in between, but nothing's better than the plastic with the plastic IQ tech in it. That's kind of the best case scenario, because it can be recycled. If it ends up in containment, great. But now we have a solution for pollution if it ends up in the open environment.
Very nice. Now, you mentioned earlier about a stocking program. So, companies can, access the BioBottles bottle caps without,
Yeah.
long lead times. Did you feel like it was a critical part of your mission to make that, adoption simple?
100%. I looked at the competitors out there in marketplace and what they're doing right, and kind of what we were doing wrong. In the beginning, we didn't have a lot of infrastructure. I didn't own my own manufacturing company, so we leveraged the facilities that we did have. But most of those, a customer would come to us and be like, "Well, we only need 10,000 bottles." Well, my minimum order quantity was 100,000 bottles, so I would lose that customer. But now, with the grace of Almighty, what's happening is we're now manifesting and attracting, and I think this is a big part of this, the right team members, the right partners, the right people and companies into our world. And one of those is a company called Premium Container Packaging, PCS. They're out of Utah. My friend Charlie over there, he saw what we were doing. He's got his own bottle manufacturing facility, and Charlie's like, "Hey, listen, let's get this thing mainstream. Let's create, we call them the Dirty Dozen, 12 sizes. We'll stock them in white, black, and amber brown. And if a customer needs just as little as one pallet, we'll have product right there, ready to ship within 24 to 48 hours, ready to go." So we've solved the major problem, which was a lot of these brands and manufacturers, they don't have warehouse space to keep 100,000 bottles sitting there. So now we were holding the bottles at our facility, and they can order and get them quickly and in stock. And the best part is, because we're controlling the manufacturing, our pricing is exceptional, right? So we're going to start all new customers out at a 10 million bottle tier mark. So it's as if
Wow.
you're walking in the door day one and ordering 10 million bottles from us. We're going to start all new customers off at 10 million bottle tier. So what you're going to find is, not in every case, but our pricing is extremely competitive, and in some cases less than what they're paying now for a regular bottle. So we're really making some big strides, and that's thanks to Charlie and his team, Anthony and Daniel and everybody over there.
So even if a customer is ordering whatever your minimum order quantity is, the price they're gonna pay is gonna be as though they had done 10 million bottles or something like that.
That's right.
That's amazing.
That's right. Which is huge. That's a game changer for us
Oh,
and
sure.
for our customers. Because now they can walk in day one and have an affordable solution that's better than any, and now they get to tell that story to their customer as well. And that's a big part of why a lot of these brands are making this switch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I write articles for industry, and I often talk about what are trends, and sustainability is a big trend. So this is an important issue, and at the risk of being slightly philosophical, history tends to remember those companies that choose to be leaders before they're required to.
Yep.
Why do you think those early adopters matter so much?
Well, my mentor used to tell me you can always tell the pioneer, and I don't know if this is a politically correct statement or not, but by the arrows in their back, right? Just basically meaning the trailblazers are always the ones that have the target on them, right? And I kind of feel like in the beginning or the first several years, we had a target on our back from a lot of people who were afraid and scared of what we were bringing to the marketplace, and they didn't want it competing with them. I'm not going to go too much into that, but we've had to overcome a lot of adversity in that regard. But it's the brands that say, you know what, we know this isn't going to be easy. This is going to be counterintuitive. It might be a little bit more expensive than what we're paying. This is kind of the beginning days. But we believe in the mission, and we believe that doing the right thing will ultimately pay off for us in the long run, not only for as a brand, our ethos, but for our customers. And the point I'm trying to make is we have some companies like that, and I love to acknowledge them. I mean,
well, yeah. So do that. Tell us some of the brands that have already embraced BioBottles, BioCaps. What does their leadership means, not just for GreenFrog, but for the future of the entire industry?
Yeah, and we need people like Charlie and companies like PCS. A company called Feel Good. They are in Costco, and they're exploding. They're killing it right now. So they've got BioBottles in all of the Costcos. Costco, I want to acknowledge them for indirectly, but supporting the BioBottle and what Feel Good is doing, and that's growing, and there's a great momentum there. A brand called Elevate. That's a relatively newer brand. They've been around for about a year or so.
Yeah, I know that one.
They've been absolutely amazing and supportive, and again, it was costing more in the early days, but they said this is part of who we are. This is what we're going to do, and there's dozens of others. And without those brands, we wouldn't be able to create momentum and awareness and get the word out there. But it also comes from consumers, right? Consumers have to demand these types of products or this type of packaging being used by their favorite brands. And then those brands it's kind of like you got to meet in the middle, right? So consumers got to be aware that we have this solution.
Right.
And then brands, if the consumer wants it, then the brand's certainly going to want to do it. But then the brands also have to like hey, listen, this is good for everybody. We need to be doing this too, and meet in the middle.
Yeah. So manufacturers, retailers, distributors, they all play a role in helping sort of that responsible packaging become the new standard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and we're seeing it between Costco and brands and co-manufacturers.
Yeah,
it's happening, and it's exciting to watch. It's just not. I wish it would happen faster, but we're getting there.
Okay, so you mentioned consumers, and what about them? Can the simple act of choosing one product over another actually influence the direction of an entire industry with regard to this kind of sustainability initiative?
Yeah, we're seeing the data is clearly showing that brands that take initiative with their packaging and how they promote sustainable resources, consumers will pay more for those brands, but they create more brand loyalty because they understand that this is a problem as well. And so I think that was a big part of the push with Costco, and I can't say 100%, but I do feel like this brand Feel Good, they were already very successful, but when they introduced the BioBottle into the mix, it kind of just sweetened it just a little bit more, right, for the consumer and for Costco and for everybody involved. So it's been really well received.
This whole discussion makes me think about, issues of carbon footprints and so forth. And one of the things that comes to mind is, let's imagine for a moment that we don't make any changes. We stay on our current path. 20 years from now, if nothing changes, what kind of world do you think we'll leave behind?
Well, I think we're just driving off the cliff, right? At some point, we're going to hit that point of no return. I'm not saying BioBottles is the end-all, be-all, not by a long stretch, right? I know it's just one solution amongst all of them, and they all need to kind of go hand in hand, but if the technology exists and we really truly can make a change right now,
Yes.
We should do that. I believe we have a moral responsibility to our customers as an industry and to the planet as a whole and to each other to just do the right thing. It's not that complicated, and I'm really,
No,
my
it's
team
not.
and I are trying very hard to make this extremely affordable and accommodating and easy to use and transition to. We're eliminating all the excuses at this point, right? So it's
You
kind of
are.
like,
You
yeah,
are. And which makes me wonder if the opposite, if 20 years from now, what does it look like if enough brands decide that protecting human health also means taking responsibility for environmental health? What happens then? What does it look like then? I think it looks a whole
yeah.
lot better.
I feel like 20 years from now, all brands and consumers will be thinking about what are we leaving behind as they're creating their products, right? So right now we focus on formulation and how do I make my packaging look really pretty so it stands out from everybody else? Like how do I gain market share?
Right.
But they don't really think about, well, what happens when the bottle gets thrown out? No one cares. It doesn't even matter at this point.
You're so right.
And so 20 years from now, I think I would hope even in 5 years from now, as brands are introducing products to the marketplace, this is already baked and embedded into that conversation.
You know, I know you've said, it may have been during our last conversation, but I know you've said something to the effect that we have a once in a generation opportunity to change history. Can you just, I kind of see where you're going on that, but would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we're there. We know that we need to do something different. I kind of feel like a lot of people just don't know what that different is, and so we that's really why we exist, is because we want to educate brands, consumers, manufacturers, retailers that right now we have technology that can move the needle, and we've got the science. This is not. This is not something that isn't technically proven. We already have the data that shows that this doesn't leave microplastics behind.
Right.
You're going to have your naysayers. You're going to have your doubters. You're going to have your haters. You're going to have like associations that have a different agenda, right? So there's going to be misinformation out there all the time. I can't stop that from happening. But what I can do is I can look at the science and what we've done in ASTM 6954. That's the international gold standard for measuring if something leaves microplastics behind or not. We've passed that testing data. We've done a $5 million test to see if there's microplastics left behind in the ocean with independent universities and countries. There are many countries now adopting this technology they're making almost a requirement that products that be imported into their country use this technology. So this is not just a US thing, this is a world global thing. There's a movement happening. You have your opposition that doesn't want it to happen, but it's purely financial. It's not because the science isn't there or the science doesn't work, right? So you have the naysayers looking at the science like, oh, no, it doesn't work because this, and this. They spin it, but the reality is it does work, and we know it works, and that's why I think we're getting so many brands now adopting and moving forward. But like, we don't care what others are saying. We believe in this, and we're going to move forward with the mission.
So, Adam, tell me,
Yeah.
what does success actually look like to you? In other words, is it building a successful packaging company? Is it creating a new standard that outlives GreenFrog itself?
I think it's all the above. We're now being approached by food container companies. Right?
Oh, like, awesome!
Like milk jugs and sour cream containers and like all things that I really wasn't thinking about. We're now being approached by those industries, and they're saying this is amazing. We want to adopt this. I don't know. I want to make a difference. I want to see change, and I would love to build a successful company doing that. We're certainly not a nonprofit by any stretch, but at the same time, I feel like the mission's much bigger. That I was chosen to do this in some way, shape, or form. I've always been a protector because that's my human nature. That's why I got into the industry that I did. But I feel like this is a totally unique opportunity to do that in a much larger scale. And I have children, and they're going to have grandchildren, and I don't know if you have grandchildren, and I feel that this is something we can all rally behind. It's not overly exciting. There's a lot of other things that occupy our time and our energy and our effort, but it's important. And it's not any more important than other things that are in people's lives, but it's something small we can easily change and adopt that actually will move the needle. So that to me is the biggest thing. So I'm doing a lot of hand talking. I apologize. I don't know what's going on over here.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm a hand talker too.
I'm getting passionate.
I love that. So since you're passionate, let me ask you this question. If every CEO, entrepreneur, retailer, manufacturer, investor, and consumer that's listening today could take one action after hearing this conversation, what would your passionate self ask them to do?
Well, I think it's important that they understand that we've already done all the due diligence. So our technology is FDA food grade compliant. The bottles and the caps will last for 5+ years on a shelf, right? You're not losing any performance. You're not losing any, there's no difference between what you're using now and transitioning to a BioBottle and a BioCap. So my challenge, right, to anyone listening to this is you have to really look in the mirror and you have to say to yourself, am I a part of the problem or am I part of the solution? Yeah. Right? And so I know that I can sleep really good at night, know that I'm part of the solution. And so I want to challenge everybody to say, be a part of the solution with me. I cannot do this on my own. Yeah. Okay? It's way too big of a I can't eat the elephant, but I can eat it with everybody helping. Right? And so I feel like the Charlies and the Feel Goods and the Elevates and many other brands I don't even have time to mention, they're saying, we're going to commit to this and we're going to make a difference and we're going to make a change. And I feel like collectively we can absolutely move that needle, but I need help in order to do it. And you're a big part of that, Gene. Like even getting on this podcast, I'm so grateful to just get the word out there because I can't do it on my own. So
no, and you have something really, really special here. I'm very impressed by it, and I'm thinking because I get a lot of times, I get people coming to me, brands coming to me to ask me to formulate products, and I put all the science behind it and all that. But I'm thinking moving forward, I'm going to say, have you given some thought to the sustainability as well? Because oftentimes I'll use sustainable ingredients. But now I have something really interesting to offer them with regard to sustainable packaging, and I think that's really, really important. I
guess my final thought would just be just give us a chance, right? Just give us a chance to quote what you already have versus what we have, and I think you will see that there isn't that big of a difference, and that making that change is much easier than you thought.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Adam, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing this information. I think it's extremely important. I think it is a once-in-a-generation kind of opportunity to make a huge difference. And I love the idea so much that it's possible to make such a significant impact on our environment by just making a simple choice. If you're a brand, you start using the sustainable bottles. Use this technology. Use this packaging material. You're not going to pay anything significantly more, and it's not only good for the environment and good for the planet and good for the people. It's also good for business. You also are going to be able to say that you legitimately are doing something sustainable, not just buying a plastic bottle with a little pyramid shape on the bottom that says it's recyclable.
And I think that's a great point. I appreciate you bringing that up because as part of transitioning to a BioBottle and a BioCap, we have our logos, we have marketing materials that all the brands can actually use on their packaging that educates the consumer that they themselves are using a BioBottle and that they're making a difference. So they can leverage that to generate an ROI, right, for themselves,
Absolutely.
create brand loyalty, but then also let that consumer know that it's a responsible brand doing the right thing.
They can offer true sustainability, not just
I appreciate
not just
you.
looking pretty, but true.
Yeah, well,
sustainability.
it all goes hand in hand. You need it all, but we're just one solution of many. Again, we solve the problem of if the bottle ends up as pollution, we can all feel better that there's not going to be any microplastics left behind. So on that note, I'm grateful. I appreciate the opportunity again to be here with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being my guest today, Adam, on the Vitamin Professor. And for those of our listeners, if you liked what you heard and what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you think it's really important, don't forget to share it as well.
Yeah, and they can visit us at GoGreenFrog.com. I'm going to do a little shameless plug.
Absolutely.
GoGreenFrog.com. Visit us. Or if you want to get some samples, sales at GoGreenFrog.com. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. See you next time on the Vitamin Professor.
Bye.